The natural beauty of the Moose River region of Nova Scotia, with its mix of thick forests and scattered clearings, stands in stark contrast to the intense activity that once.
This is Nova Scotian land. It's a lot of trees, man. It's all cliff sides and trees. You find some big old billy silly goats hanging up on the mountain and whatnot.
Thrive below ground. Gold was first discovered there in 1876, igniting a rush that transformed the region to a bustling mining industry. Prospectors flocked to Moose River, lured by the promise of wealth, and over the next several decades, miners would extract an impressive 26,000 ounces of gold. In fact, so rich was the area that the entire community was named the Moose River Gold Mines. Despite its early promise, however, the prosperity of the mines wasn't destined to last. Before the 20th century was even over, much of the easily accessible gold was gone, and with it went the mine's activity. This left a labyrinth of underground tunnels, quiet and abandoned when it ceased operation in 1889. Pumps were turned off, allowing water to flood the shafts, and the equipment was simply left behind to corrode in the damp air, and the once thriving network of mines grew silent as the forest reclaimed the surface. The lure of gold in the region, however, was not entirely forgotten. In January of 1936, a group known as the Moose River Gold Syndicate came together to take a chance to revive the mine. David Robertson, the 52-year-old chief of staff at Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children, and 30-year-old lawyer Herman McGill knew next to nothing about mining, but that didn't stop them from acquiring the Moose River Gold Mine. The formalities for transferring ownership were little more than a few signatures on some paperwork. Since the mine's old workings were never drawn up, though, there were no schematics to hand over to the new owners. Instead, they'd have to figure out the mine the same way the miners had decades earlier, by just following the two gold-bearing quartz veins, one known as the Meager and the other known as the Archibald. Since the Meager was closer to surface level, much of its deposits had already been mined, but the Archibald, which sat about 30 feet or 9 meters deeper, still held a considerable amount of gold. This wouldn't be an easy prospect, though. The new mine operators would either have to explore deeper in the mine than ever before, or risk destabilizing the mine by extracting gold from the natural rock pillars left behind as supports. But either way, once the papers were signed, David and Herman got to work right away, pumping water out of the mine and money into the operation. The two invested heavily in restarting the mine, but they faced significant challenges.
You know, I think that would be a pretty cool thing to go do, like, buy some piece of land or some kind of mine somewhere and then just get it updated, brought up to some kind of code, I guess. At least make it to where you can enter in the damn thing and then just fucking explore around and kind of have your way with it. Obviously, these guys were reprospecting it, trying to pull all the gold out. I don't think you'd be able to find anything like that today. You still might be able to, it's possible, for sure, but, who knows. Car is halfway through its journey. All right, it's halfway here. That's freaking fantastic. Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Yeah, this is a pretty interesting video. So this will be the video that I had mentioned that we will be putting up on the Absurd Entertainment channel for the first video that's going up there. We're going to be doing a couple of those. We're going to start rolling out those videos, real regularly. I gotta start doing something again. I'm losing my fucking mind. Anyway, so which means we'll be streaming, for a few hours most days again as well. But nevertheless, let me go ahead and throw a marker in here real quick so I know to cut around this when I go to edit it.
Decades of neglect had left the infrastructure in poor condition as timber supports were weakened by age and water damage. Not to mention that the layout of the mine was a mystery without a set of schematics. Without proper maps, they relied on guesses and questionable knowledge from miners who had worked there many years earlier. And in April of 1936, just days before Easter, the Moose River Mine began sending warnings that conditions were growing unstable. Miners reported cracked and bowing timbers and shifting ground, which were signs that the aging structure might not hold. Felix Henderson, the mine manager, voiced concerns about the deteriorating conditions, but these warnings came after a critical decision had already been made. Earlier in the year, Herman had ordered the removal of 4 natural rock pillars that had previously supported sections of the mine. These pillars, which were left untouched to stabilize the structure, held back the weight of the surrounding rock and soil. Against the advice of some workers, Herman insisted on mining these pillars to extract what remained of the gold within them. So reluctantly, the miners removed more than 100 tons of rock from these supports, although other accounts suggest that the figure could be as high as 200 tons.
Oh my God.
Either way, the result was a severely weakened mine.
440,000 pounds, by the way. So 2.2 thousand pounds is a ton, so do the math there, guys. But yeah, this is absolutely getting wild. I mean, just even taking this as like a passage through time is incredibly interesting. You know, all the way from 1870 something to 1919, 1921, now 1936. It's very interesting to look at the photos and everything like that to see how progression has come along in all of our blunders as a race.
Teetering on the edge of collapse. On Saturday, April 11th, David, Herman, and the mine's bookkeeper, Charles Scatting, ventured into the depths of the mine, accompanied by 2 other mine employees. That day, the group entered to inspect progress and evaluate the mine because the syndicate had decided to sell it due to its dilapidated state. The worsening condition of the mine was clear even to the untrained eyes of David and Herman as the men observed the damp, narrow passages and the creaking of old timber supports and the occasional trickle of loose rock from above. Still, they pressed on, failing to recognize the full extent of the danger. Then that night, some of the workers reported hearing concerning noises and seeing timber supports under great strain, but these warnings seemed to have not been passed up the chain of command with any kind of urgency. So, after a cursory look around, the group departed the mine with plans of continuing their inspection the next day. On the morning of Easter Sunday, David, Herman, and Charles returned to the mine once again. This time, the groaning of strained supports was even more pronounced than it was a day earlier. In fact, in the Archibald section, a small cascade of rocks fell near them, prompting the group to hastily leave. After being neglected for so long and now stripped of its natural reinforcements, the mine seemed ready to give way at any moment. And as the group fled toward the main shaft, the mine began to collapse and crumble around them. The creaking of timbers then escalated to a deafening roar as the ground shifted and tons of rock crashed into the tunnels below. The 3 men reached the skip, which is a lift that would carry them to the surface, but it had a maximum capacity of 2 people. So David and Herman then tumbled into the bucket while Charles grabbed onto the side as the hoist operator above began pulling them up, but the strain was too great. Somewhere above them, the shaft completely collapsed, severing the cable and sending the 3 men in the skip plunging back down. Despite all seeming loss though, miraculously, a fallen timber support lodged into the debris, halting their fall and forming a clear pocket of air.
Wow.
So disoriented and terrified, the men abandoned the skip and scrambled into a nearby crosscut tunnel. The air was still thick with dust and the sounds of falling rock continued to echo around them, and as they attempted to navigate their way to another shaft, they found every path blocked by debris. The realization then set in that they were trapped 141 feet or 43 meters underground with no food, heat, or a clear path to safety. Then, suddenly, there was nothing but silence.
The fear, the heart-dropping, pulse-pounding understanding that you'd have to be going through in that moment. Oh, man. I'm assuming it's mostly pitch black. Other than maybe if these guys got lights on their heads. Ugh. Dude, that's woo. That's something.
And pitch black darkness outside of the beam of their torches. Meanwhile, above ground, the collapse was devastating. A massive depression had appeared at the surface, creating an unmistakable indication of the scale of the disaster below. Felix and the remaining workers could only guess as to what happened to the men trapped inside. And for hours afterward, there were no signs of life, only the faint periodic settling of debris underground. This caused many to begin fearing the worst, but David, Herman, and Charles were still alive and relatively well. Below ground, the men had found fragments of dynamite boxes and used them as kindling to start a small fire for warmth and light. The water coming through the rocks threatened to extinguish it at any moment, but the smoke actually rose through the cracks in the rubble and became a sign of hope once it reached the surface. As faint strands of smoke began to emerge from the collapsed shaft, Felix and his team realized that this could only mean that the men had survived the disaster. This renewed the rescue effort, and plans were quickly made to try and reach the trapped men, but the challenges were immense. The original shaft was completely sealed, and the lack of proper mine maps meant rescuers were working largely blind. And with no clear path and unstable ground threatening further collapses, every move was dangerous. Specialized rescue crews from neighboring mines in Spring Hill, Caribou, and Montague soon arrived, heeding a call that went out for, quote, single men with guts. They brought with them the expertise and tools necessary to attempt the near impossible rescue, but almost immediately the lack of mine maps created chaos and confusion. Every tunnel they dug seemed to lead to another dead end, blocked by layers of fallen rock. And their efforts were made even more difficult by the constant threat of further collapses, which threatened both the trapped men and the rescuers. So after hours of futile digging, a new plan was formed. A drill rig would be brought in to bore a hole into the mine and establish contact with the survivors. Once it arrived, the drilling began, with rescuers battling against time and the fragile condition of the mine. It took 2 grueling days of precision work to reach the 141-foot level, And when the drill finally broke through, the rescuers quickly sent down a whistle. As they anxiously awaited a response, they were met with nothing but silence. Hopelessness then began to set in for the rescue team, as they believed the lack of response from the trapped men meant that time had run out. They then waited a little while longer for any sign that they were wrong, but nothing ever came. In response, the next orders were to stop the effort. One man, however, wasn't about to give up that easily. Billy Bell was a diamond drill operator for the Nova Scotia government who responded to the call for help.
All right, let's go, dude. Single man with guts right here. Billy Bell, diamond drill operator. He's the man, he's the myth, he's the legend. This is Billy Bell. Let's go. He's coming in to save the day. This is his redemption arc. He's been a coal miner operating diamond drills his entire life. He ain't done nothing but get sick as shit for somebody who ain't paying him enough. Let's go, Billy.
And he was the type of man who didn't understand the concept of surrender. While he chain-smoked cigarettes with a wad of chewing tobacco in his mouth, Billy became a one-man rescue team and
Billy Bell is a man's man. He's chain-smoking cigarettes with tobacco in his mouth, doesn't give up.
continued drilling for another 11 hours on his own. He then eventually sent a steam whistle down the borehole, and this time a faint tapping echoed back through the pipe. Billy then shouted, "Men alive," and cheers erupted among the rescuers from the unmistakable sound of life below.
Let's go, Billy.
After the drill bit was removed, a garden hose was fed down the hole, which served as a lifeline to the trapped men. Through the hose, the men were sent soup, brandy, and chocolate to sustain them, because by then they were trapped without food for several days. But while the smoke from the fire inside their chamber had given way to the cleaner air provided by the borehole, their ordeal was far from over. Above ground, the rescuers continued to battle relentless challenges. Torrential rains turned the surface into muck that complicated operations, and underground, every advance risked triggering new rockfalls, and a sudden second collapse nearly buried everyone. It was only the arrival of experienced miners from the Drummond and Acadia mine operations that managed to change things. The Drummond crew, understanding the perils of tunneling under such unstable conditions, worked to shore up the collapsed section of the mine. Under the leadership of mine engineer C.D. Sampson, the rescuers adopted his disciplined, methodical approach to tunneling. And drawing from his experience with similarly dangerous mines, C.D. ensured that every shift was calculated and every step forward was reinforced with old railroad ties and beams scavenged from the surrounding area.
Dang, C.D.'s out.
Shift advancing more than 7 feet or 2 meters through the debris, which was actually a blazing pace given the conditions. Then, by the end of the next day, they had carved out an astonishing 33.5 feet or 10 meters of tunnel. So finally on...
That's really good, man. What is that? Like, what is it, 20% of the way there? Yeah, ballpark. Like 15%, maybe 17%. Somewhere around there. Yeah, this is, I mean, when everybody can work together and get something done, look at all the crazy things that can happen, you know what I mean? But this type of understanding of who people are and all that is mostly gone, I think, in today's society. You know, there's still people that hold on to this understanding. But, yeah, it is what it is, man. You know what I mean? What a shame.
April 22nd, after 10 agonizing days of labor and uncertainty, they broke through to the chamber where the men had been trapped. Peering upward through squinting eyes, David and Charles saw the sky for the first time in more than a week and were pulled from the rubble. Their bodies were gone and they were trembling from their ordeal, but they survived it. Sadly, however, Herman did not. The damp and cold conditions inside the mine were too much for him, and he succumbed to pneumonia just a few days before David and Charles would be rescued.
Damn.
Throughout the ordeal, the world was glued to media coverage because radio brought the drama of the Moose River Gold Mines disaster into homes across the world.
Good.
J. Frank Willis, a reporter for the Canadian Radio Broadcasting Commission, became the voice of the rescue effort, broadcasting live updates for 6.
Imagine, dude, there must have been all kinds of stuff that was going on. I mean, even sitting there not having to, but deciding to broadcast this as things are developing and everything like that must be like, you're the one relaying the information to everybody that's tuned in, right? So you're the voice. You know what I mean? There's a whole lot to be said about that. And let's be honest, it couldn't have been entirely exciting the entire time. I see. For me, my brain goes to, okay, so he's reporting all this on the updates and everything, but what if, like, in the in-between time, he's like doing it like a like a 1940s baseball announcer might, you know. And here we are, step to the field now. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. I don't know. that might be a funny setup for some kind of like a sketch comedy or something like that.
69 consecutive hours. Using the mine's only available telephone line, Frank delivered gripping 2-minute reports every half hour that painted vivid scenes.
Oh, okay. Wow, dude, I thought he was delivering reports every 2 minutes. I was like, why? Okay, that's not the case. We're good.
Of the rescuers' relentless work and the mounting tension as they battled against time. And his broadcast reached an estimated 100 million listeners worldwide, making the Moose River disaster one of the first major events to capture a global audience in real time.
Wow.
This groundbreaking coverage
This is the original streamer over here, dude. Original YouTube commentator over here. This guy did it. J. Frank Willis, first ever YouTube commentator.
demonstrated the potential of radio not just as a source of entertainment, but as a powerful medium for news. It was the first time an event had been reported around the clock, and for better or for worse, it laid the groundwork for the 24-hour news cycle that defines modern media.
Look at this setup, man. Wouldn't it be good? See, obviously, these operating cabinets and everything like that, I don't know where you'd even be able to find one, much less get access to one that you'd be able to own privately. But look at how cool these are, man. I want to go back and like gain a really good understanding of this kind of tech, if that's what you even want to call it at this point, and then like learn how to rebuild them. You know what I mean? You can, dude, if you were able to find these things and rebuild them so they could work, or even just for show, make everything nice, refinish it, you know, polish it all up and everything like that. That's something. That's definitely something. I'm going to look into that for sure.
In the aftermath of the disaster, an inquiry by Nova Scotia's Department of Mines meticulously examined the factors that led to the disaster and revealed a cascade of failures. Chief among those was the owner's decision to operate the mine without registering it with provincial authorities as required by law. This deliberate oversight meant that no government inspector had ever visited the site to assess safety. This meant that the mine's decaying infrastructure and Herman's decision to mine crucial support pillars went unchecked. And in an ironic twist of fate, the deputy inspector of mines had reportedly heard rumors of activity at Moose River just days before the collapse and planned to visit the site the following Tuesday. Obviously, it was a visit that came tragically too late.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the inquiry highlighted the human cost of operating outside the boundaries of regulation and called for more robust systems to ensure that such tragedies could not happen again. If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching.
Yeah, wow, incredible video. Yeah, so Scary Interesting on YouTube, guys. Make sure you drop by the channel. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. You know what I'm saying? Give that video a like. That was good.